Okay. Today we're going to finish off what we started last week about Bitul of Safek Issur. We're in the last din Kuf Yudaled, and the Shach had spoken about. A person has saffron, and the Rajah had this chashash. In his day, there was a chashash that the saffron had pieces of meat, stringly pieces of meat mixed into it. People would fake it out because it was a very expensive spice, and other chashashas. So it's considered Safek Issur, and the Rajah wouldn't eat it. And we spoke about the following: that's saffron. These are pictures. This is a review from a little bit from last week. That's what the spice actually looks like. It's the three little flower actually. Well, that's what the flower looks like in the stamen. The three orange stamens from each flower are what makes up the spice. Okay, and I have no idea. So what we spoke about last week was that it's Safek Issur, you're not allowed to eat it. Okay, so the Shach talks about what happens if you want to take this spice and put it into food. So the Shach says a bunch of different reasons why it might be mutter to do that. Of course, the concern is Bitul of Safek Issur. So the Rajah said, the Shach said that, and it's not a problem with Bitul of Safek Issur. That's what the Shach says. Don't worry about Bitul of Safek Issur if you put it into your food, because keeping the Safakum yesh Kashrus Issur. Okay, it's only a Safek Issur. And then we spoke about last time the marmakim that he gives to that. That's what we spoke about last time. What exactly what he means by those marmakim that he brings. But the simple understanding that we took it for was that this is because of Safek Drabanan L'Kula. Since Bitul of Safek Issur is only Issur Drabanan, therefore it's only Safek Issur. So Safek Bitul of Safek Issur is mutter. That's what the Shach spoke about. That's what we spoke about last time, and what that means, and how that fits into those marmot comments that he brings on the bottom. And the practical application that we had for that was, if a person has liquid medicines that have in them glycerin in them, you don't know if the glycerin is kosher or trade, so it's Safek Issur. You don't know if it's mutter or it's asur. So we talked about that maybe what the Shach said, that you could be vatal Safek Issur, would allow you to do the same thing. You could take this cough medicine and mix it into apple juice, and we gave a cheshbon on how much you have to put into it to mix it in. It's Bitul of Safek Issur. No, it's only Safek Issur. So the Shach says here and in many other places that you're allowed to be vatal Safek Issur. Okay, that's what we spoke about last time. Okay. But it's based on, and that's what we spoke about last time, this marmakim that it brings on the bottom, that those last things, those marmakim tell us, or the Megadim says that that's what he means is, that it's because of Safek Drabanan L'Kula. Okay? I'm going to mention on the side, because we'll bring it up again, there was an alternate way to read the Shach that was not because of Safek Drabanan L'Kula. Okay, so today's discussion is this all makes sense, because we're looking at it the Rabbanan, and so we're saying it's Safek Drabanan L'Kula. Okay, and the question we're going to talk about is it really Safek Drabanan? Okay, we assume that the rule of Bitul of Safek Issur is an Issur Drabanan. Okay, but over here we have a more complicated shaila, and the complicated shaila is because the shaila here started off as an Issur D'Oraisa. The Issur D'Oraisa was that there was meat mixed into the saffron. So the shaila here, the reason why you couldn't eat the saffron itself, the karkam, is because it has a Safek D'Oraisa in it. So the question is, if I have something that started off as an Issur D'Oraisa, and it now turned itself into an Issur D'Rabanan, is that treated like an Issur D'Oraisa, or is it treated like Issur D'Rabanan? Which way do we treat such a shaila like that? Which is, it's a mix. It's a little bit of a D'Oraisa and a little bit of D'Rabanan. Right now, the part that I'm facing is D'Rabanan. But the question as it started, it's based on a shaila of a D'Oraisa. Okay? So, the beginning of that discussion is not here. The Shach has called close Eiger. You have to simon kufiyot. It's printed close Eiger, and the Shach there, just for the setup of it, because we're going to go back and forth between them. First is a long version, and then there's the kitzer afterwards. Okay, what I'm quoting to you now is from the kitzer. Okay, the Shach was a long version and then a short version. Okay, so this is from the short version, close Eiger, the short version of it, and it says like this. It says, "Ein armim Safek Drabanan L'Kula, ela im hasaveku ba'atzmai." It's got to be that the Safek Drabanan is an inherent Safek Drabanan. Like, for example, it's a shaila of something that's bishul akum or not, so that's a Safek Drabanan. So over there we say it's Safek Drabanan L'Kula. That's what you say Safek Drabanan. Umitzad atzma hu Drabanan. It's inherently a shaila of Drabanan, like bishul akum. Okay, but avol isim mitzad atzma Safek Issur Torah. If it starts off as an Issur Torah, umitzad acher bashul hu Drabanan, and there's some side reason that makes it be a Drabanan, ein amim b'zeh Safek Drabanan L'Kula. Okay, so in that kind of case, you don't see Safek Drabanan L'Kula. Okay, so the Shach says, how do I know that? So he says, here's a raya from the following. Okay, here's a raya from a din in Siman Kuf Yud. Okay, right before this din, in Siman Kuf Yud, it says the following. Okay, you're not going to see the words. Okay, what it says is like this: you have a piece of meat. Okay, you have a piece of meat, and it's a Safek. That's why it's yellow, because it's a Safek. You don't know whether it's kosher or treif. Okay. What did you say? Okay, so you don't know whether that piece of meat is kosher or treif. Okay, and now it got mixed into other pieces. Okay, it mixed in a way, that it would be bottled. Okay, but it's a davar chashuv. Okay, the meat is a kind of it's a piece of a meat in a way that cannot be bottled. Okay, it's meat that cannot be bottled. So the Shulchan Aruch says, if the Shulchan Aruch says it's not bottled. So Shach says, why is it not bottled? Why is it a bottle? A davar chashuv not being bottled is only the Rabbanan. So this is only right now. It's only shayv with the Rabbanan. The reason why it wouldn't be bottled is only because of the Rabbanan rule. He says, you see from there that if you have an issur that started as a shayv with the raisa, right? That piece of meat that we had before was a shayv with the raisa. You couldn't eat it because it might have been an nevelach, so whatever the shayla was to it. He says, so you have a piece of meat that's a shayla with the raisa. Now it's only a shayla with the Rabbanan, because now the only reason why it's not bottled is because it's a davar chashuv. You see from there that an issur the raisa is now becomes an issur the Rabbanan. You treat it like an issur the raisa, and you don't see something the Rabbanan cool. Okay.
So the something which is bottled the raisa.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there's no not giving it whether it's bottled the raisa or not, because
again, say if it's bottled.
If it's bottled the rope.
Mm-hmm.
When anything was bottled the rope, so now the raisa it's bottled.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter because I have to treat it all the way down the line with the raisa.
If it would be bottled. If it would be bottled with the rice, if it would be completely bottled, then it would be mutter. But here the problem is when
it's still
if it's also the bottle. No, in this case, the reason why it's not bottled mid the rice, it would be bottled.
Right.
Mid the Rabbanan got caught up on a side issue, which is that it's a davar chashuv. It's a kind of a thing that can't be bottled. So mid the Rabbanan, the Chacham say you can't be bottled. So mid the Rabbanan, it can't be bottled.
So the fact that something is bottled the rope,
Mm-hmm.
so mid the rice it's bottled.
Correct.
It doesn't matter because now it's saying any deravan. Any.
No, only with the chashuv, chtichon is coming, all those.
Why? But anything. No.
When we say something midrabanan can't be bottled, means the Chacham said don't let it be bottled. Treat it like it's not bottled. But here the problem is that it wasn't for sure usher in the first place. It was only usher to be something.
When Rabbanan say don't treat it as if it's bottled, then it's like over the raisa.
Well, it usually not. But in this case, since the original shayla on the piece of meat was a shayla with the rice.
The right pass is the rice, because the first pass is on the rice of the chumrah. Right? The first one is on the rice of the chumrah, it's awesome. Now you want to say, okay, now it became downgraded to the Rabban because of Bitul, so now we don't say. Why? Because the Chatchila, we already passed on the rice of the chumrah.
That's how that explain. I'm going to. There's going to be a bunch of different ways to explain it. That's one way to explain it. Just for the sake of it. Okay, now. So the Shach says, wait a second. No, I don't take away from that. There's such a thing. But the Shach, yes, it comes from Ataki Moshe. This din Shulchan Aruch is from Ataki Moshe, and the Shach is almost word for word from Ataki Moshe. Okay, which then the Taz brings it as well. Now, the Shach says, but it's not true. It's not really true. He's got another case, and it's in Kuf Yud Aleph. Okay, it turned the page the other way. Okay, in the case in Kuf Yud Aleph, it says like this: a person had 2 pots of meat. Okay, one was kosher pot and one was treif pot. Okay, he knew which one was kosher and was treif, and he had 2 pieces of meat, and one was kosher and one was treif. Okay, that's what he had. And now he doesn't know what happened. One fell into each pot. Okay, so he doesn't know whether the kosher meat fell into the kosher pot or the treif meat fell into the kosher pot. He doesn't know which one fell into which. Yeah, you didn't learn your data, did you? Okay, so he doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know which one fell into which. Okay, so he's got these 2 pots, and he had these 2 pieces of treif meat before. He doesn't know which one is in which. Okay, so the thing is, if it's in such a situation, Shulchan Aruch says, where the meat would be bottled with the rice no matter what, the case is not important for us. Even if the treif fell into the kosher, it would have been bottled with the rice. The Shulchan Aruch says, you can eat it. It's okay. You could be toiler. You remember 2 times ago we spoke about being toiler. You could be toiler with the Rabbanan. When something's only a shayla with the Rabbanan, we say toiler with the Rabbanan. We assume we're toiler. We assume that the kosher fell into the kosher and the treif fell into the treif. Since it's only a shayla with the Rabbanan, again, because it would have been bottled with the rice anyhow, whatever his case was, so we're toiler and we say that the kosher fell into the kosher and the treif fell into the treif. So the Shach says, well, make up your mind. Over here it was a shayla with the raisa. Right? We don't know. There may be it's a deraisa in one. It's something that we may be a deraisa. We don't know which one fell into which. Why are we giving it the coolest to say we're toiling with the Rabbanan? He says it's because the fact that there's it's a deraisa floating around is not enough to make it us. Okay, so make up your mind. So Shach says, so which one is it? do we say that the rice that becomes the Rabbanan treated like a deraisa, like in Kufyud, or do we see it treated like Rabbanan in Kufyud?
The whole thing now is Cheskes Hector.
So yes, so that's good, correct. So the Shach is like this. The Shach is a very vague lashon. Okay, I did not know what the Shach meant by itself when I read it. The Shach says, I'm sorry, the word's not here. Shakol sheyesh loymar shema ein kan isur klal. If we have a situation where there might not be any issue at all, like in the left side, okay, in Kufyud Aleph, there may not be any issue at all. Could be that the hector fell into the hector. Then Hari has safek mitzad atzmoi boloi shugum d'rabbanan. That's considered a drabbanan. As opposed to over here, in the case on the right case, we know for sure that the Safek Issur fell in. We just don't know which one is the Safek Issur. In this case, we don't know that Issur, even Safek Issur, fell into the kosher pot. We don't know what fell into the kosher pot. We don't know anything at all. As opposed to this case, we do. Okay, I didn't know what he was talking about, but Pri Megadim says like David says, Pri Megadim is now in the earlier part of the Shach. I told you the Shach, there's a long version and a short version. This Pri Megadim is in the long version of the Kol Yisrael. Pri Megadim says, the Shach means like this. In the kosher pot, there's a cheskes heter. Okay, in the kosher pot, the kosher pot has a cheskes heter. So the chazaka lets us assume it keeps on being mutter. As opposed to over here, there's no cheskes heter to work with. Okay? I have no idea how that fits into what the Shach said. What that has to do with Thailand and all this kind of stuff. But anyhow, that's what the Pri Megadim says. Okay. So, the rule, we got out of this, but listen to the rule we pulled out of the Shach. The Shach, this is his rule. Usually, if something from it is a deraisa and it turns into a derabbanan, we treat it like Safek deraisa. Okay? An exception is if we're not even sure if the Issur deraisa fell in, we don't even know if it happened, like in the Kufyud Aleph. We don't even know if it happened, then we could treat it like a derabbanan. Okay? So he is not exactly clear what it is, but his rule is if we're not even sure if it fell in the first place, then we could, and now it's a derabbanan, we could treat it as a derabbanan. If we know that something happened, but we don't know what the usher, then we treat it like it's a deraisa. Okay. Now, so now. Let's go to our case. Let's go to our case here. We have a medicine. We know that the glycerin was put into there. Like in this case, we know that the Safek Issur was put into that. We know that it happened. And we know that what went in was the Safek deraisa.
We don't know that it was any of
We don't know. But it seems to me it's exactly the case in Kufyud Aleph. Something was put in. We know that the piece of Safek meat was put into there. Piece of Safek meat was put into there. It's definitely in the mixture. The Safek Issur is definitely in my mixture, but I don't know whether the Safek Issur, which is in my mixture, was a mutter or asur. Okay, so it's not like the case in Kufyud Aleph. In the case in Kufyud Aleph, I don't even know if the Safek Issur got into my food. In the case in Kufyud, the Shach says the point here is that in Kufyud, I know that the Safek Issur fell into my food. So that sounds like exactly like the case by our medicine, which is I know that the Safek Issur is in my medicine. Okay, so that's a side question. That side question, whether it's a Safek or not. But in fact, yes, it's a 50-50. Almost exactly 50-50 kosher treif. There's a little more kosher, but the treif costs less, so it's 50-50. It goes both ways. It's a Safek. It's an absolute pure Safek. So I have Safek Issur that fell into my food. I know the Safek Issur is in there. The Shach says that's the case, so we treat it like the deraisa. So my question, and the same, so my question is like this. Can we apply what the Shach said, what we spoke about last time? The Shach says when we have Safek Bitul of Safek you could do it, but the Shach is telling us that if the reason for that thing was because of Safek Rabbanan L'Kula, then the Shach told us over here, this is not a Safek Rabbanan. Our case is no longer treated as a Safek Rabbanan because the beginning of the Shach was a Safek deraisa. So how can you say that we're going to let you dilute the medicine because it's Safek Rabbanan L'Kula? Well, because it's only Safek Bitul of Safek. The Shach says, don't treat it like a Safek Rabbanan. Treat it like a Safek deraisa in this case. Okay, so that's a first question. In order to answer that question, I'm not convinced I can answer that question. But in order to answer that question, I'm going to answer you a different question.
Not sure what the chiluk, but they are very different, right? The other cases was you had something which was downgraded. This chefza was downgraded from the rights to the bottom. Here, being vatam isil chatchila is not right. It's not. It was downgrading. It's a fool. It's an act of being a vatam.
And therefore.
I don't know what the therefore is. I'm saying it's very different.
Okay, so I'm going to say something like that. Maybe. We're treating it as a drabanan. Yes.
I had a question. I wasn't here by the first piece of
Kufyud.
Was there a bad Eiger?
No. No,
Never-
you missed the colors. Yeah, it was a Safek Issur. It came in as a Safek Issur, so that sounds exactly like our case. What came in was a Safek Issur, and now what we're facing is a Drabanan, but way back when it was a Deraisa. Okay, sit down. But I ask you another question. Okay? The way I would be saying right now, the way we stand at this point is, I have a shayla about being bottled in medicine. But what about the saffron case? The case where the Shach really said you're allowed to do Bitul of Safek. And the Shach said was, in the case of Shulchan Aruch, you have saffron that might have meat in it. You have milk, you have butter that might have chol akum mixed into it. What was the third case? I forgot the third case. It was the third case. Okay, he had a bunch of cases. There were a few different Shachs who spoke about that you do Bitul Lechatchila. In those cases, we don't know that the Issur is in there. Okay, those cases at face value sound like the case in Kufir Aleph. We don't know that any Issur was put into the saffron. Okay, so as the medicine case where we know the glycerin is in there, we know the Safek Issur is in there, sounds like Kufir. The case of the saffron, the karkan may have meat into it. That's exactly the case. It sounds like, on face value, like the case in Kufir Aleph. Because we don't even know if the Issur is put in. The Shach says, it's possible the saffron has zero meat into it, then you treat it as a Drabanan, which is what it is now. Okay, that will be at face value. But the
Safek Issur. This pot, I had this pot in front of me one day. I knew it was kosher. Saffron came to me. I'd have been usher already. I got a hold of the saffron.
Good. Those are people who are going to say it's like that. Give us, be patient. I'm going to get that. I'm saying like this. I'm not convinced, within the words of the Shach, the way the Shach understands the killer, I'm not convinced that it's right. I'm not convinced that even the saffron case makes sense. And I'll tell you why. Remember what the Shach said? The Shach, at the beginning, his first opening as to what the side of the Deraisa Drabanan was. Let's see if my slides work backwards. Let me come out. Here. The Shach says, this is the words of the Shach. Okay? What we're looking for, the criteria here is that is it inherently a Drabanan? It's mitzad atzmo it's a Drabanan? Or is it mitzad acher that it's a Drabanan? So in this case, I have saffron. And now I want to do Bitul Lechatchila. Is the shayla of the Drabanan mitzad atzmai or mitzad acher? Which one is it? When I'm taking, I have the saffron in my hand and I'm going to throw it in. Bitul Lechatchila is mitzad acher. That's not inherent. It's not built into the shayla. Bishul akum is a shayla. It's mitzad atzmai. It's a shayla Drabanan. When I take saffron, I want to mix it in. That's not mitzad acher. So it's true later on we have details about whether we're short filling or not short filling, but it seems like very clearly to be mitzad acher. It's coming from an outside way that would, considering that this should be Issur Drabanan. So which is to say is, so why was the Shach letting you buy the butter and the saffron? I forgot the other cases that he had. We spoke about last time. So it seems to me, I don't know if this is right or wrong. What Langer was saying, so I'll blame it on him. I'm supported by Rebbi Langer. Like this. That Kenzine, that when does the Shach talk about, when do we talk about, go back to my pictures again. When do we talk about the rice that turned into a Drabanan? The rice that turned into a Drabanan is when the shayla that we have in front of us is reasonably one shayla. Okay, right now I have a pot. I don't know which one fell into which. I don't know which thing fell into which thing. I have a Drabanan element and a Deraisa element in my pot. In my meat, I have a Deraisa element in my Drabanan. On one hand, it was a Safek Deraisa. On the other hand, it's only not because double Chashav. It's reasonably one big question. So then, I don't know if it should be a Deraisa, should be a Drabanan, and the Shach is giving us rules how to know whether it's a Deraisa or Drabanan. But in the case of the Bitul Safek Issur Lechatchila by the saffron, it's very clearly two different shilas. They're not even close to each other. The first shilah was I had saffron in my hand, that was a shilah of a Deraisa. Now I have a completely different question. Can I do Bitul Lechatchila? I have a completely new question. It has nothing to do with the beginning part of it. Of course, it's a little bend on the fact that maybe there's this in here, but it's a brand new one. Maybe in that side, you can go so past mitzad acher, that's like you're starting a new shilah again. You're waking up again. I have a new shilah. Can I do this in Drabanan? It's not connected. Of course, it way back when it has to do with Deraisa, but I'm so starting from fresh that I can completely look at it as a Drabanan. So I can completely ignore the Deraisa element of it because I'm starting completely from fresh. Can I do a Drabanan? Okay, I don't know if that's accurate, but it would explain how the Shach's Bitul Lechatchila, how he let some Bitul Lechatchila fits with what he said about Kufilal, maybe. And if it would be true, then it would let us do the medicine also. Okay, if that's what we're headed for, it would let us do the medicine also, because we view the medicine also as if it's a completely new shiloh. Okay? I'm very not convinced that what I'm saying is correct. But I'm trying to explain why the two Shachs fit with each other. The Shach by us, and in many places said, you could do Safek Bitul Lechatchila. He said, you're allowed to do that because it's only a Safek Darabana now. That's how we understood the Shach, because it's only a Safek Darabana L'Kula now. And I'm saying, but look, in the other place, the Shach says this is not a Safek Darabana L'Kula. And so I'm trying to answer for you that it should be Safek Darabana L'Kula, which is what the Shach says over here, and that will help us then maybe for the medicine also. Okay, now I'll remind you, in a second, in saying it in very quick, briefly, that we had another side, what the Shach means. He doesn't mean Safek Darabana L'Kula. He means is in Kavanas Levato. Okay, a whole different side that had to do with the Maram Kamis that he brought, that maybe the Shach only meant a bit, he meant in Kavanas Levato. If that's what he meant, if all that was what he meant, then we had an argument about it, but I said then that I didn't think it would work for the medicine case. Okay, right. Now,
The difference with the saffron, it's not something with the epsom and the saffron, it's going to be a problem. It's only whether it is an animal.
okay.
It's not actually you have a piece of meat, it's how outside is a sucker.
So you say, because over here I want to eat the piece of meat, and over there,
I want to eat the saffron. And now I have a question as to see this, whether there is something added on.
I'll think about that. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, now I have to say something. What I told you till now, the Shach had this question. Okay, this theory here from what Simon Kufyut to Simon Kufyut Aleph. The Shach asked that question himself. He says, you see from here? There's two. Sometimes we look at it as a deraisa, sometimes we look at it as a rabbanon. Okay, that's the Shach's question. Okay, well the Shach gave his answer. That it depends on whether we know there was Vada Issur mixed in, or we know that there was something mixed in, or we don't know something mixed in. That's what the Shach says. Okay, but a number of other Achronim give very different answers to them, to that question. Okay, they give very different answers. The first is like this. There's a sefer called Toras Hashelamim. It's from the Minchas Yaakov, which on Toras Chatos, or the Chok Yaakov on Hilchos Pesach. Okay, a very prominent Achron has a pirush on the Shach's Kol Sfek Sefer. And he says, I don't even understand the kasha. He says, it's not even a kasha. The Shach's steer from Kufyut to Kufyut Aleph is not even a steer. He says like this. He says, what we need to do is, when you want to decide if something to deraisa d'Rabbanan, okay, I think this is what I was saying before, if I remember. Okay, if you want to decide if something to deraisa d'Rabbanan, he says, it doesn't have anything to do with whether it was Safek there, Safek was not there. He says, you have to, in each situation, look at what's the thing that's up for debate. What's the true Safek that's going on over here? So, in the case in Kuf Yud, the Safek that there is whether that first piece of meat is kosher or treif. That's the Safek. Okay, that's the whole Safek that's here. Okay, the fact that later on it turned into another case where it was only double chashiv and it couldn't be both has nothing to do with anything. That it is a double chashiv. That's not a Safek, but it's a double chashiv. For sure, it's a double chashiv. The only question that there is that piece of meat, the original piece of meat, kosher or treif? Is that a shayla d'oraisa or d'rabbanan? That's a d'oraisa. That's a shayla d'oraisa. So this whole question will be treated as a d'oraisa because the real question at hand is that piece of meat kosher or treif? Okay, he says. Now let's go to Kufyut Aleph. Is there any Safek which of those original pots is kosher or treif? No, we know exactly which one. Is there any Safek which of the pieces of meat before they fell in were kosher or treif? No, there's no Safek. There was no Safek. Everything was very clear. So what's the Safek? What's the thing that we don't know? What we don't know is which one fell into which pot. Okay, that's the Safek that we have. Which fell into which pot? That's a d'Rabbanan. Because even if the wrong one fell into the kosher pot, it's only less than d'Rabbanan. So the Safek that we have is what fell into what. That Safek is not more than a d'Rabbanan. It's true that the thing we're thinking about is treif meat, it's also a d'oraisa. But that's not the Safek. That's information. There is a Safek d'oraisa. There is a d'oraisa floating around here. But the Safek is what fell in, and what fell in can't be more than d'Rabbanan because it would be batal. Okay, so he says in each case we look at what the shaila is. We look at what the Safek is, and whatever the Safek is, that's what decides whether it's a d'oraisa or d'Rabbanan. Now, what happens? What happens now to all the cases the Shach said of Bitul, Safek Bitul, our case of saffron, of Safek Bitul Issur Lechatchila? What's the shaila that we have? Again, the saffron might have meat into it, and now I want to do Bitul Issur Lechatchila. What's the thing that's up for debate? What's the shaila? What's the Safek over here? The Safek is if there's meat in my saffron. That's the only shaila that there is. I'm being mabatel something, that's for sure happening. Saffron by itself is kosher. Treif meat is treif. The shaila is there treif meat into my saffron? That's the Safek that there is. That's the Safek d'oraisa. So the Toras Hashelamim would not let you put it in there. Back in the case of the medicine, the only thing that's unknown, the Safek is whether the glycerin is kosher or treif. That's the Safek d'oraisa. So if that's the Safek d'oraisa, he says you decide it based on what the actual Safek is. What is the thing that's unclear? The thing that's unclear is if the glycerin is kosher, if the saffron has meat into it. Those are Safek d'oraisa. So he would not allow you to do it. Now, next.
But you can do it
if you did it would be Balta, but you did the wrong thing. You weren't allowed to be Balta because the Safek here is a Safek D'Oraisa. Okay, now, the Pri Megadim, this Pri Megadim is in Siman Tzavi Tes, by the din of Bitul of Safek Issur. The Pri Megadim talks about, he literally talks about our case. Okay? He doesn't say liquid medicine, okay? But he comes as close to that as saying it. He says, what happens if you have, you're not sure if Issur D'Oraisa fell into a food, and now you want to be Mavatal it. You want to go ahead and be Mavatal it. Okay? That's exactly our medicine case. We have something in there that has maybe Safek D'Oraisa into it, it's not Batal, and you want to add on to it to make it be Batal. So the Pri Megadim says, last week's share said, Safek D'Oraisa L'Kula, Bitul of Safek Issur is mutter. That's his first thing he says. Like we said last week, it's only Bitul of Safek Issur is only D'Rabbanan. So now it's only Shayla of D'Rabbanan, so Safek D'Oraisa L'Kula. Okay, what we said last week. Then the Pri Megadim says, nope, not true. He says, go look at the Shach that I just quoted. Go look at the Toras that I just quoted. He calls it the Minchas Yaakov. That I just quoted to you, and you see there that you're not allowed to do it. Because this is not a Shayla of the Rabbanan, this is a Shayla of the D'Oraisa. Okay? So the Pri Megadim, in other words, what I'm telling you last week and this week, that's what the Pri Megadim says. He says you're not allowed to do that. Okay? So Pri Megadim is like famous that you cannot dilute the medicine like that. Now, he doesn't explain that this rule that he said, that he started by saying maybe it's only Shayla of the Rabbanan because Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, the Shach says that our Shach says that. He doesn't explain how that's not a steer one to the other. But I have to say, I noticed something in the Pri Megadim, that the Pri Megadim in 4 different places, the Pri Megadim uses a wording that the Shach does not use. Okay, and that is, which I did not use. I did not use that. I tried to not use that word until now. And that is, this Shayla of it, Issur D'Oraisa that turned into an Issur D'Rabbanan, the Pri Megadim calls it, I have at least 4 places where he calls it Gilgal. Okay? This thing was, and the way we talk in modern words today, it was nisgalgal. Okay? It rolled over. Something that was a D'Oraisa became a D'Rabbanan. Okay? The Shach never says that. The Shach talks about something that's an Issur D'Oraisa, umitzad acher became a Shayla D'Rabbanan. When the Pri Megadim describes this kind of a Shayla, he calls it a Gilgal. Something that was a D'Oraisa that was nisgalgal to be a D'Rabbanan. Okay, so when you hear those words, he says it, I have 4 places where he says that he calls it a Gilgal, then you very much understand why he wants to be machmir. Gilgal is, listen to the wording of Gilgal means is, if the first thing you bang into was a D'Oraisa, then, sort of like David said before, we pass it already Shayla, Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra. So once you decide that, the fact that it rolled over into the D'Rabbanan, you can't get away from that. You already made the decision the first time. You have no rights to get away and say, oh, now it's a D'Rabbanan. No. The first thing you banged into was a Shayla of a D'Oraisa. Now the fact that it rolled over into another thing, you can't get away from that. Okay? The Shach doesn't use those words. The Shach talks about whether is it mitzad acher. Is the D'Rabbanan coming mitzad acher, or is it mitzad atzmai? Okay, so then there might be more room to somehow see it as being mitzad atzmai instead of mitzad acher. Okay? And the same thing also, Rebbi Eiger also talks about the Shayla. Okay, he also uses the word Gilgal. And he says, Rebbi Eiger is a little complicated. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, but Rebbi Eiger has a very interesting Shayla. Okay, he says that if you have a person who had dishes, you've all heard the Shayla, has dishes, they were definitely used for kosher, either meat or milchiks. He has no idea whether they're milchiks or fleishiks. Okay? He goes to his buddy's house, and she gives him dishes, and no one has any idea whether these are the milchik dishes or the fleishik dishes. He talks about whether you should cash them. He talks about whether you could maybe...
You got it from someone else.
Did for what?
So you have the same zero switching.
No. He talks about whether you mechuy to kasher. The kasher, what should I do with the dishes? In fact, one of his possibilities is that you should kasher it. Okay, but the shayla that is first is, he says, is, wait a second, I'm getting the dishes when they're in the binyayim. So I get the dishes as only D'Rabbanan. So maybe you should say it's a Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. And I could pick one of the sides and that's it. I'll say Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Tell them the D'Rabbanan. I could say that it's a D'Rabbanan. On the other hand, the shayla started off as a D'Oraisa. Okay, so what should I do with these dishes that I have in front of me? Should I treat them as a D'Oraisa? Is what?
It was not shayla. It was not... When they were Binyamin, they knew what they were.
So Rebbi said this. He said, I'm going to tell you, I have 2 studim why, if it's a D'Oraisa that becomes a D'Rabbanan, it should be treated as a D'Oraisa. Okay, I'm going to take 2 different ways to understand why it is, and then we'll see if and he says, I have enough to between the cases. Okay, it's like this. One shot is, when we have, it's like the Toras Hashelamim in my mind, is that when you have a shayla of a D'Oraisa that's now D'Rabbanan, you look at what the base shayla was. What's the base, the core shayla, is that a D'Oraisa D'Rabbanan. The other tzad is that you don't look at the base shayla, you look at when was the Safek Noilad. Okay, look at the time when the suffix started. At the time that the suffix started, was it a Deraisa D'Rabbanan? Whichever one it is, that's the one you keep. Okay, then it was Deraisa D'Rabbanan, that's the one you keep. Okay, here's two versions. Here's an afkaminas. A person had a pot, and he cooked food in the pot, and he knew when he cooked it whether it was kosher or treif. And when it was Eina Ben Yomer, he forgot whether what he cooked in it was kosher or treif. Okay, so he says, if you look at the base shiloh, the first way, look at the base shiloh was the piece of meat that I cooked in the kosher or treif. The base shiloh is a shiloh of a deraisa. The fact that it's Eina Ben Yomer doesn't make a difference. The base shiloh was the piece of meat that I put into the kosher or treif. You have to be machmer. He says, if you look at the time of the suffix happened when it was already Eina Ben Yomer. The suffix was noilad only after. When you cooked it, we knew exactly what it was. But now we forgot. So it's Eina Ben Yomer, so it's a D'Rabbanan. Another case. You had a power of a pot. Okay, and you cooked something into it, and you don't know whether the thing,
There was no suffix.
By the what?
In this case, there was a suffix.
In which case?
You cooked something, a suffix, also suffix after.
Yes.
After doing that, there was already a matter of a suffix.
So Piggy says, it depends on what the Eiger shiloh is. The Eiger shiloh is whether it's deraisa. It is mutar also it's a deraisa. If you talk about when it was noila the suffix, and when it was Ben Yomer, it wasn't noila the suffix yet. There was no suffix yet. We knew exactly what it was.
There was no shiloh. There was never a shiloh. When Grandma was using her dishes, she knew it was milchik tzafashik. There was never a suffix.
There was not a suffix. So Piggy says, if you go by the time when the suffix was noilad, then the suffix was in Ben Yomer. If you go by when the suffix, what the real shiloh is was the meat kosher or treif that was put into there. The real shiloh is kosher or treif. That's the shiloh of the deraisa. If the shiloh is when the suffix was noilad, the suffix was noilad afterwards. We can't go. So I'm skipping the second afkamina, but he says, but in my case, where the bubby used it for sure for kosher, and the suffix was only noilad afterwards as the milchuk tzafashik, both studim would be mekel. The base shiloh is only D'Rabbanan. I skipped the middle case. Why? The base shiloh is only D'Rabbanan because it's only milchuk tzafashik. The shiloh, the noilad suffix was afterwards Eina Ben Yomer. That's also D'Rabbanan. He says it's Eina Ben Yomer. He says you could make on his case. Okay. So so his case, it's an interesting case, and it's a very halacha l'maaseh, the case he's talking about. It happens all the time. But again, the Eiger is saying, if the Eiger shiloh, and when the shas noil has suffix was the deraisa, you have to be machmer. So what would he say if you have saffron that maybe has meat mixed into it? So the Eiger shiloh is a shiloh of deraisa. There's meat maybe mixed into it. When was it not on the suffix, but it was a deraisa? Again, I only want to do Bitul of Safek days later, but when the shiloh was started, the shiloh was a shiloh of deraisa. So Rebbi Eiger and the Megadim and the Toras Hashelamim, all would not agree to at least to applying the case of the Shach to our case of medicine. So just
nothing can happen with any suffix deraisa that will downgrade it.
Nothing could happen to a suffix deraisa. Well, things can happen. You could be mobile with it a zillion times over. You could make it. Something new could happen, but you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to turn it into a Bitul of Safek." They're saying that makes it D'Rabbanan, right? So they're all saying that basically you can't do that, or very rarely can you do that. And the Shach was more open to that being happening. Okay, so just to summarize, the Shach by us said that you could be mevatel something that has a Safek Issur in it, even though it's a Safek rice into it, the Safek meat mixed into it. He said you could do it because Safek D'Rabbanan l'kula. Okay, there's a kasha from the Shach himself who says that he can't do that with something that's a deraisa that turns into a D'Rabbanan. It's not treated as a D'Rabbanan, it's treated as a deraisa. Okay, so I had a chiddush to say how you could be miyashiv, how these shachs would work. If I would be right about that, then you'd be allowed to do the medicine. If I'm not right, then we're up the creek, and you would not be allowed to dilute the medicine. And there's a whole bunch of Achronim here who answered this steer from Kufyut to Kufyut Aleph, or this apparent steer from Kufyut to Kufyut Aleph, in ways that are not like we're saying in the Shach, and they would not allow you to be about the Safek Issur. Okay? So as I told you last time, we had some prominent people who said that you're allowed to dilute the medicine. In fact, we tell that to people. That's what Olson told the share. And so we tell that to people that they're allowed to be about the medicine with Safek glycerin in it, with glycerin that Safek Issur, they're allowed to be about it. There's this. It's not so clear that it's mutter. There is, before I turn off the recorder, I have to tell you, someone who I was talking to about this said there's a whole an angle to be mutter for a different reason. Okay? The people who said it was mutter didn't say it for what I'm about to say. Who said another angle, which we'll get to in a few weeks, which is maybe it's really us to do it. It's Bitul of Safek Issur, but maybe the Issur of Bitul of Safek Issur is mutter for a chayil. maybe you're allowed to do that for a chayla. No, so we're trying to get you around and say it's only Safek, so you're allowed to do baba, it should be mutter for some reason. We'll talk about in a few weeks in Mitzvah and Kuf Chav Gimel that maybe you're allowed to do Issur D'Rabbanan for a chayla. So maybe that's a different angle to be matter. But this, the known reason to be matter, say maybe...
It doesn't seem to be accepted. I mean,
what do you say?
That doesn't seem to be the halacha. I mean, we have so many things we learn about medicine.
Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But this is quite... many people follow this idea, which we've been talking about for the past 2 times, this time and this time, that maybe you could do because of Bitul of Safek Issur, and my point is that it's not so clear. Okay, this question I'm being able to say that.